Hello, everybody. This is AmpdPanda on the AmpdPanda Podcast. Thank you so very much for taking the time or for listening to me in the background or, just kind of hanging out, checking out some of the highlights for the podcast. It's been a bit. It's been a while. Lots happened since the last time I've actually posted up these little podcast moments. Really, what we're doing here with the podcast itself, and I guess it's probably good to put the time of intent and kind of what's the whole goal of this thing, right? Well, initially it was just kind of a lot of folks urging me to put some stories together, which I will actually probably start putting together now for some of these future episodes of the podcast. But really, I'm not normally kind of a big podcast person. I don't usually like to talk about myself and things, but I figured there's a few good reasons I think really to kind of do this. I think one, it's a nice little chronological kind of idea to talk about not just the events, but also what I'm going through, things to tackle that might be helpful for anybody listening. But also the other thing too is, having kind of a more of a family that's expanded than just me and my wife, but also having children as part of the priority now. And who knows, these chronological adventures, journeys, journal entries, things that kind of put these things in perspective might be good to put together. And the third thing, which it's really kind of the big push of why though, is also because of the fact that I very much can't stand social media in the sense of all the craziness that is in here, all the complicated algorithms, all the crazy things that are being shared on all of these social media platforms are just a bit ridiculous. And it's all ever consuming in the sense of it's so freaking negative. It's so basically controversial. It's so conflicting. It's so painful in most cases that, not to mention, out of all of the rage baiting and ways to try to get a view, to get a buck, to get things like that, it's just ridiculous. There's even things I'm seeing that I've never seen before, never had them, my algorithm whatsoever, never paid any attention to, and yet here we are for things that's the most ridiculous. But there are some good moments, some good memes and things, but most of the time it's just all attributed to either total BS, total freaking out of touch folks that are getting the attention and really just trying to promote it on their side. And honestly, it's killing me. It's literally killing me to the point where I myself want to make sure I get the voice out there, make sure I can kind of bring some realism to the world, as there's a lot of controversial, painful, awful things on here. And it doesn't matter which platform, Meta, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, they all have all of their goals, they all have their intentions, and they all have ways to try to maximize. I mean, you're just seeing the scrolling here, and it's literally just showing, controversial things, out of touch streamer takes, influential, woke versus non-woke, political reviews, and things I also don't care about. Singers like Sabrina Carpenter. Lucy Lawless is cool. I actually like watching her, and talking about her initiatives that she goes through. But it's it's craziness. It's either an OF fan just trying to get their stuff promoted, or somebody is trying to get something triggered, or Elon Musk talking a whole lot about what his intentions are with everything, like video games, XAI. Yeah, let's bring more AI to actually create video games and a full world of competition from a big organization to compete against other organizations that literally kind of take over and monopolize the whole market. That'll fix everything. Yeah. Sorry, I'm being a little cynical myself. See, but this is the problem. I'm already cynical, and we're just talking about this. So it's really ridiculous, and it's really what kind of pressed me to start talking about these things. And I'll probably find some topics here that is something I'm pretty passionate about to discuss, something to overcome, and something to help kind of ease the course. I'm not going to have all the right answers, but I can certainly bring, a hopefully realistic take that honestly won't, oh my God, that's freaky. And of course, just more sex everywhere. That will just be able to kind of help level set the playing field, because it's just ridiculous. Especially with the conversation of streamers saying, what's better, a 9 to 5 or streaming? Streaming's a lot harder. And it's like, you haven't even had, that before, and now you're talking about it, but whatever. What do you guys know? I've been doing a 9 to 5 my entire life, and I do this as a hobby when it comes to either podcasts and videos and things like that. So, but let's talk about something a bit more uplifting. After I rant about probably the one situation, like for instance, the one story I've even kind of interactive with today, and this is a good idea. This is probably the one post I was hoping for, and it's probably listening to everything we're talking about. We're going to talk about Star Trek here in a minute, because Star Trek is just great, and it's a nice unification. It's nice, a little bit uplifting, be more like the concept of what Star Trek's supposed to be. But before we get to that, so the story that I ran into today, which just kind of shows the ridiculousness that just kind of comes up with everything. I'm literally, and this is the day before Thanksgiving, literally going to the supermarket with my wife, and we're literally heading that way. And the thing that's crazy, this is 2024, November 27th, and literally we're walking from our car to Kroger or whichever supermarket place that you're going to, and literally walking in, we get all of our things, which we got a list of things we're grabbing and making sure that we get a hold of for our Thanksgiving celebration that happens tomorrow. Fair enough. It's not too crazy. Actually, the Kroger we went to was a pretty good place because it was fully stocked. It wasn't full of ridiculous people just kind of running and rushing and trying to get everything together. And we check out, we get all of our items, we check out, we purchase everything, and we're walking back to our cars. And of course, the parking lot's pretty full. There's a lot of folks there, but it's not ridiculous. It's not to the point it's going out to, the highway and the feeder roads and the cars are blocking and everything like that. But literally on the way, not kidding, on the way back, there's this Tesla that pulls up and literally parks in a handicap spot. And me and my wife are seeing it, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm sure there's a handicap notice on their license plate and on the front of the car. Of course, we've noticed that they weren't as we were walking by. And just these two teenagers, or at least two young ladies that definitely don't look like, they're probably in their young adult age. They're probably 19, 20, maybe 22, early 20s, probably the most. And literally, they walk out and start walking towards the front of the door in this handicap spot. And it's just crazy upon reflection, because me and my wife were even talking about it, because a conflict started to ensue, which we'll get to in a second. But like, upon us discussing it, like, as I was growing up younger in the, early 2000s and 90s, you would never, ever see a situation, anytime we would ever, as kids, go to the supermarket, and again, they're not even called supermarkets really anymore, but grocery stores, Walmarts, or whichever, you would always see those handicap spots either completely open, or if there was some that were there, it was kind of a rarity. And when it was, it would always, in my book, growing up in upstate New York and a few other places, that you would never ever see anybody just illegally parking in places like that. And I know it's such a simple thing, but it's just silly and ridiculous, because it was one of those nonverbal understandings that those were not touchable unless, of course, you had all the handicap notices in the world and it was well known that you were there. But this is the place that we're at nowadays. There's literally a lot of things just being overwritten. There's a lot of borders and lines being crossed. There's a lot of confrontation. And I feel like just a lot of overall negativity when it comes to that sort of stuff that is just taken for granted. There's not a lot of, empathy. There's not a lot of, being gentlemanly, manners, and anything of that nature. It just seems like more and more as these generations grow up that a lot of that is just being lost. And it's such a sad thing. Crazy enough, it kind of made me laugh just a little bit, because we had an older gentleman. He looked like he was a veteran who basically said, whoa, what are you guys doing? And he's like, you do realize that's a handicap spot, and it even says van accessible underneath it too. And the ladies were just like, well, yeah, we're just, my friend here is very sick and whatnot, and she can't really, she can't really walk too far. And it's like, I don't think that works. And it definitely didn't pass the test for this guy that was challenging their parking job when it comes to this. And so that individual decided they were going to go back to their Tesla, which was a brand new one, by the way, and just sit in the Tesla while two of her friends decide to go into the store to pick up whatever they need. And it's sad. It's just sad. It's ridiculous. It's awful that not only does this need to be corrected, but it just seems to become more normal. Either there's an intent for folks to do these things, to push the boundary of illegalness and the sake of convenience. And it's just a terrible thing to see nowadays. And it really it does make it very sad to me, and why it's so essential for folks to try to be individuals with higher standards, higher manners. Take the cart that you take from the store, put it in the cart place, open a door for somebody, cross the street for an old woman. Kind of like how the ability of what, Star Trek and things of that nature used to be fulfilled, right? And, we're all doing this. There's no money exchange. There's none of that sort of thing. Everybody is doing something for the greater good of humanity. Everybody is doing everything that they can to better themselves as individuals, to be better than they were before. And, in the principles of what that is. And that, honestly, in my opinion, is much more worthy and important when it comes to the sake of, Star Trek and the world that is in there and the principles that it stands behind. And Star Trek is generally one of the most favorite things for me to always talk about when it comes to that. Because Star Trek was always one of those where everybody wanted to better themselves for the sake of humanity, for what was a good thing. Manners also involved. Yes, there's conflict and war, but there was a bit more of a unification. There was a bit more of everybody working together to try to make something better out of it. Prevent a disaster, prevent an assassination, prevent, conflict the best as possible. Like Undiscovered Country, which we're seeing here, when it comes to two warring factions that have been there together. And of course, if you were to ask me, Captain James T. Kirk's always been my favorite Kirk of all time. But, and I'll get to that in a second. But, it was always one of those things where you have Kirk, who's literally lost a son. He lost a lot of things to the Klingons in the past. And this is before the Klingons joined the Federation, and Next Generation was Jean-Luc Picard. And literally, he is put in a situation to bring peace amongst the people, amongst this peace treaty that does eventually get signed and moved onwards. And it's such a fantastic thing to see, especially in Undiscovered Country. The Star Trek movie, though, that I appreciate the most is actually Generations, which is my favorite. I know. I already see people in the comments. Wrath of Khan was everybody's favorite. Everybody loves Wrath of Khan. Totally get it. Totally understand. But Star Trek Generations is where it's at for me. And a guilty pleasure one, which is even, less so, is probably The Final Frontier, number 5. And I'll probably do a video on that in the future of why that is. But when it comes to Generations and why Captain James T. Kirk is probably my favorite is because he evolved as the young buck captain of 5 years, discover countries, taking over the Enterprise and bringing out the best in everybody by, gambling in the sense of discovery, putting yourself out there for the sense of making sure that the mission is done, self-sacrifice, as well as anything else when it comes to that. And that's why Generations to me is always one of the better takes. Of course, First Officer, Commander William Riker is also my other favorite individual. He's just such a, played by Jonathan Frakes here. He just has the mannerism of, basically the gentlemanly towards all women and everyone he loves and adores and is loyal to them to the very end, which is what is also exhibited by Captain Kirk as well as Jean-Luc Picard. Captain Kirk, though, he's given his life to Starfleet, sacrifices it all, and then even helps out, even in the afterlife when it comes to being in the Nexus. Even though it's probably not. Well, it is him, I guess you could say, in the case of the Nexus. Because, him and Jean-Luc Picard, band together to stop Soren and to do so well. And ensuring that, at least in their timeline, in their world, not everybody is self-sacrificed and killed for one man's passion to have the ability to try to live forever in the Nexus. Such a great story. Seeing, kind of the range and the background of Kirk in the mountains, because I myself want to be a mountain person. It's actually probably an old goal of mine. But his death was very intense for me. I remember tearing up even watching this the first time. And him saying the words, "oh my," and just then showing the scene of him being buried in rocks. Surprisingly enough, there's some novelizations even written by William Shatner that brings Kirk back. The Romulans bring him back from the dead in order to do nefarious things, but ends up changing how it works. So it's a pretty interesting kind of take on it. But yeah, Kirk, Picard, top two, obviously. Benjamin Sisko isn't too bad. And, kind of with all that together. But my point is, be more like the principles and the guidance of Star Trek. Try to do the best things that you can for good things of the world, good things of humanity, all to the point that if, let's just say, an outside observer was seeing us as we're doing our day-to-day, that they would understand and get a good idea of semblance of what good morals, good manners, good treatment would be, not just to the women we love or the friends that we have, but those who need the empathy more so than ever, especially in these trying times. When it comes to depression, when it comes to mental health, they are big things that are still being discussed today and are still causing a great amount of pain and suffering that people are dealing with. And it's not just a regular type of suffering. It's a big thing of suffering behind the scenes and silently. In some cases, folks with support around the world when it comes to mental health and things they're experiencing after all of us are trying to kind of live through post the vid. It's a difficult thing. It's difficult times, and it's totally reflected off of many things, that things continue to be harder to deal with. Everybody's enduring so much, and it feels like the corporations and all the big companies and businesses are just trying to find ways to scrape more of a buck from, kind of the mid to lower class, which is also being very difficult to learn. So for this Thanksgiving, go the extra mile for the extra person you are with everyone around you, more than just family, and try to do even better things that you never thought you could. And that way it leads to even better Christmas and holidays, as we see here for Star Trek. And also just a better well-being. Because in the end, we're all trying to help each other out. We're all the same race. And if we all want to try to get to other planets, like many of our leaders up top are trying to say, or maybe some people that have more money than they do time and interest, it's going to take that unity for us to go onto the next and final frontier. I don't believe in a no-win scenario, which is a famous quote from Mr. James T. Kirk himself. And honestly, I believe that as well, despite how far gone many folks can be. And honestly, we should all strive to try to get above the planet's atmosphere, get into space, and go second star to the left and straight on till morning. So, happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.